don't know what changed over the last few years, but it seems like demos were the norm a few years ago. So props to Square for releasing a demo for this game, which has been everywhere. I'm sure you've probably seen clips of it. So if you are interested in this game, get out there and try it. It'll give you a good feel for the game, but just know it does open up quite a bit after the prologue. So I'll go ahead and get into my review, but thanks for putting the demo out there. It was a smart move, and I think it'll pay off for Square. If you did play the demo, you probably noticed the dark fantasy setting. That's almost kind of like a Game of Thrones style vibe, and I'm definitely here for it. Final Fantasy 15 I didn't really love, and a lot of the older Final Fantasies do have a little more kid style atmosphere, and I think sometimes they suffer from this like vague esoteric feel, where a lot of times they're discussing themes and not like what's actually going on in the story, or it can be real confusing. This one felt so much more grounded, and honestly, to me, it made the drama feel more real. Usually, with game development cycles, it makes sense that they were probably starting on this right around the time Game of Thrones peaked. Thank God they didn't start in 2019 with the way it ended. But I think we all enjoyed Game of Thrones for a while, and the meat of the story in Game of Thrones, the political intrigue, the backstabbing, the larger looming threat, the magic, the brutality of the world. Man, the brutality of the world, as you see right here, it's all present in a game, much less a Final Fantasy game on top of that. And you update the combat system for 2023 with a mixture of Devil May Cry or God of War mixed with a Final Fantasy VII remake style fighting experience. It feels like after Final Fantasy 15, where they were kind of on this transformation over the years with each game, leaning a little more into the action side and giving the players more control, coming from the turn-based style of the roots of the Final Fantasy series. Did I mention the story was dark? You can see how some people were skeptical. It seemed like this was a really ambitious game, and it was going to have a lot of trouble living up to expectations and pleasing everyone. But every now and then, we do get a game that seems to please almost everybody. There's always one or two. And if you really want to experience some weapons grade cringe, go look up people who boycotted this game or some of their reviews. I think Kotaku comes to mind. Not that it's really going to be all that impactful or important, as once the demo came out, it was pretty much all anyone was talking about. And rightly so, I may add. Much like Game of Thrones, this story is massive and could be confusing to some people, but thankfully with the addition of active time lore, which allows you to pause the story at any point, get background details on different characters, their allegiances, who they're a dominant of, basically which summon or icon as they're called in this game they control. It allows the story to be truly massive without feeling overwhelming at any time.
Clive Rossfield, a bearer of the Sambrequois Imperial Army sent behind enemy lines, with orders to wait until it turned into a brawl, then slit the dominant's throat in the chaos.
I didn't know it was her. How could it be?
Moving on to the acting, which might be the best I've ever seen in a game. Ben Starr, who plays Clive, Ralph Ineson, who plays Sid from Game of Thrones and recently Diablo 4 fame, and Susanna Fielding, who plays Jill, all deliver exceptional performances and really make the dark, emotional aspects of the story really pay off. I gotta say, I've never felt goosebumps like I have at points playing this game, and I've never felt sadness like I did in a couple points playing this game. Except maybe in the original Final Fantasy VII, but I don't think even that level was reached then. Just because the realism in this game, the groundedness, the acting, there was no voices in that game, and the, realistic movements just really make you become immersed in the game. So I think that made the story just really hit for me. If you played the demo, you know, but there's even more impactful stuff in the actual game. So just be ready. Not long after starting the game and getting through the prologue, you'll be introduced to Sid, who is kind of like our character Clive's mentor in this game. He will take you to his hideout, Sid's Hideaway, which is going to be like your hub area where you can upgrade weapons, purchase items, potions. You can train, different things like that. You'll get a lot of your missions here. And then when you're ready, you can head out to the map, click on the different more open areas, and then within those, you'll head to your specific missions. Kind of like Jedi Survivor, I think, is the most similar game I've played as far as the world structure. As far as combat, it may sound disappointing at first when you realize there's only like 3 buttons and there's an attack button specifically just to attack, but it is much, much deeper than it looks. Um, at first, you'll just be doing like a little 4-hit combo until you learn the different intricacies. And what's cool is you'll have access to most of the moves from the start. You can do things like juggle enemies, you can teleport to enemies and then attack them on the ground, you can wreathe your blade in fire and explode it into them while they're on the ground, you can juggle them with Torgal. It's really kind of limitless, and I'll try to go through and show you here just some examples. Um, we have our normal combo that we do. I'll show here just the normal 4 or 5 hit combo, and then you can also, once you upgrade, do your little fireball attack in between each, and that will make it hit much harder. By the way, this is the training area you can access from Sid's Hideaway at any time. You can go in and customize your training. You can add Torgal, remove Torgal, set them on auto. You can put indicators for perfect timing. You can change your enemies to any enemies you've encountered. Pretty much do whatever you want. Here we're seeing the precision dodge, which is the dodge mechanic. Whenever you do a precision dodge, you can counterattack right after. Just showing that there's so many different ways to modify your attacks and create different combos. Here we're going to send Torgal to attack right at the end of our precision dodge and counterattack. Then we can jump in the air, downward attack. We can continue combos by having Torgal finish after we do. You'll get the icon abilities set to different icons. Here we see one that Garuda has, which allows you to lift up in the air after grabbing onto an enemy. It allows you another way to avoid or juggle yourself into the air. Here is the parry, which is difficult to pull off, but once you practice it, it's a very, very cool, rewarding feeling. When we do that, the enemy will be opened up and time will slow down. Here we see a stagger. Enemies will stagger and then they will kind of fall towards the ground. That's when you want to try to unleash most of the damage. Come in here and practice, it'll really help. There's a thrust. Here's one of our icon abilities, Ignition. We'll get a little later in the game. Rising Flames, which we'll start the game off with. Heat Wave, which is a counter that we can do. You can just do it as a normal ability, or if you want to block incoming damage and you time it right, it powers it up, as you can see here. Here is the Limit Break, which it's kind of like your super mode Clive goes into. You'll be familiar with if you've played other Final Fantasy games. Basically, you can chain all of this stuff any way you want and freestyle, and then when you're doing that, add in Torgal and manipulating your enemy and avoiding their attacks by your certain moves. That really, really makes it deep and interesting. There are QTE-like events like this certain times in the game, especially during some of the icon fights. So they're actually pretty fun. So here's some of the exploring, just wandering around. There will be chests and stuff. They're pretty far in between, and there's not a lot to explore and find. You can see the map here. This is one of the more linear open areas, but there is some exploration. I do think that could have been expounded on a little bit, just make it a little more rewarding. Most of what you find is crafting materials, but there are the odd weapon and armor upgrades you can find out amongst the world as you explore. For the most part, though, you're heading from one objective to another while in the open world or looking for a certain enemy or fight or mission or something like that. There will be times it'll slow down and let you explore, but um, it's a decent mixture. It's mostly like Final Fantasy VII Remake if you played that, but it is a little more open. This is an icon fight, and if you played the demo, you've got a little experience with that, but man, they just truly have to be seen to be experienced, and are maybe the most epic moments I've ever seen or played in a game. It's something like a blockbuster movie at times, and the music and production quality feels like it is that level. Um, I really just don't have any way to explain it, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll show you a little bit of this one.
Where is he? Where is the dominant?
As far as enemy design, I mean, you have the giant icons that you've seen, but then you have, your other normal traditional enemies that you're going to fight along the way, ranging from like this guy is just an annoyance along my way level to the not quite a mini boss level that will give you a little bit of trouble to some really difficult mini bosses and so on. They're varied, so you'll usually run into some of the same enemies in areas, but there will be enough variety to keep it interesting. It won't just be the same model over and over. So, and your tactics will have to change sometimes with different enemies. I will say about not quite half, but there's a point in the game when you reach it, you'll realize is like definitely a partition. If this was an old style game, I heard Fighting Cowboy. I watched one of his videos. He mentioned it would be like the disc one. If it was back in the day, and I definitely think that's a good way to mention it. But around that time, maybe 40% through the game, 30% through the game, um, and then things really open up after. You're introduced to a different kind of enemy where it is a reskin, but it makes sense with the story, and it's really cool how they do it. A lot of times you'll see enemies that have this certain type of reskin that fits in with the story, and they'll be much tougher. So that's another tier of enemy as well that you'll see, and even though they may be similar, they'll have completely new move sets and abilities and things like that. So there's a lot of variety there. Level design is interesting and varied as far as the types of areas you'll see. You have the normal, like, kind of grassy plain areas that are real open with some exploration where you'll be looking for animals to find for hunts. And then you have, pretty soon after that, you'll get to an area that's kind of like a volcano. And then there's a desert area and so on. So it's not all the same through that you see in some games, and they do a good job of at least keeping the level design varied enough that it's interesting to look at. Graphically, the game I had no real issues with. There was one area I can think of in a large city when it was under siege and being hit that there was a little bit of slowdown, but It was really minor and didn't distract from the story or gameplay for me really at all. So the graphics are definitely a plus throughout. Uh, this is a Final Fantasy game, and because of that, it's still an RPG. The RPG mechanics have been toned down quite a bit, so if you're looking for a super deep stat-based system that you're gonna spend hours diving into, like you would with Diablo, where you're comparing stats and little items and tweaking things. It's pretty simplified, so you'll level up as you defeat enemies, and then you do have abilities with your different icons, and you can go in there. You'll earn ability points, which you can spend on different abilities. You can upgrade those abilities, and you can master them, which it'll either give you some little kind of perk, or it'll allow you to like move some of the abilities to other icons. Like if there's an icon you don't really like his abilities, you can take one that you do like from another icon and move it to the icon that you don't really enjoy his abilities with, and you can customize a little bit. It's not super deep. You do have kind of like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, what were talismans or rings in those games. There's items you can equip. There's 3 slots, and they offer a little bit of extra customization. As far as weapon upgrading, it's not super deep. There's usually just a few levels for each weapon, and there's going to be some special weapons you can hunt materials for. Or after you defeat certain bosses, they'll drop something that allow you to make some new weapon. So you'll be getting lots of new weapons, but don't expect like Elden Ring where you're going to be taking it to plus 25 or anything like that. At the Hideaway, there's lots of fun little distractions like the hunt board where you can go and see monsters that are out in the area, and they have different ranks, and they'll increase your renown where after you defeat them, you can come back and you'll get donations from people who follow basically our little group. When you're out doing the monster hunts, some are really difficult, and they're on par with some of the harder bosses in the games, like this Griffin, for example. Um, it wasn't like ridiculously hard, but it definitely took everything I had to get through them, and was a bit of a nail biter in the end. So they're fun, and sometimes the main story can be real long, and it's a blast, but it's like dramatic and kind of white knuckles. So sometimes going to these little monster hunts is a fun little reprieve. And then while you're running around the area, you'll run into little side quests. You'll be out just killing some monsters and go around a corner, and you'll see somebody and they'll have an exclamation point, and then basically a lot of times some of the quests can be a little boring or simple, like oh deliver these 3 bowls of soup to people, you know. But some are really interesting, and it's like oh you can learn to ride a chocobo if you do this, and you may not know what you're going to get, but just know the ones with the plus symbol a lot of times are the more important ones, and they'll usually give you some type of ability to, use, like, again, riding the chocobo or certain things like that. I'm not going to spoil anything, but those are the ones you definitely are going to want to do. I talked about it briefly earlier, but there's tomes that you can visit. He's another fun distraction in the Sid's Hideaway, and you can go talk to him anytime. It'll update his little encyclopedia, and then you can do a little deep dive on all the little things that you need to learn about. There's like a monster um, data center. You can go in and look at all the different monsters, and uh, just a lot of more detail if you're looking for that. So that's real interesting. And then you meet this character later on who's like a little teacher, and she'll take you in and do these um, kind of like little cinematics where they show the advancing armies and political things that have happened before you move on to different areas, and kind of how the world maps change while you're off doing your own thing. So that's all pretty interesting. And like I said, if you enjoyed any of the Game of Thrones type stuff going on and vying for power, and if you like any type of military conflict or things like that, it's all very interesting and really well done. It looks like they spent a lot of time and definitely put a lot of attention to detail into the story and the way it's explained to you. If that weren't enough to keep you informed with what's going on in the story, there's still a whole nother situation map thing where you can scroll through the timeline from the prologue that you played with the demo all the way up to where things are now and all the things that have happened. It shows troop movement, Clive movement, what happens with the icons, and is real detailed. So not only are you learning like all the different players, but you can see over time like when things moved around and changed. And then there's this like um, kind of web style map with all the characters, and they have all their relations on there, and who's friendly with who and who slept with who. It's all real interesting. Did I mention the story's a little adult or dark? I think I did, but it's not crazy dark. Like it's I wouldn't say it's quite Game of Thrones level, but it hits that in parts. It kind of crescendos in moments that are real shocking. And then you kind of get this day to day like dread of what's going on, and it's kind of disgusting way people treat each other in this area. There's kind of like a little bit of like a slavery aspect, so just know that's going on. You can read the kind of interaction here going on in the background to learn a little more about that. So it's not too heavy-handed or like too ham-fisted with a lot of games, so I think they did a real good job portraying it in an interesting way. But just understand going in, like A Song of Ice and Fire, if you ever read the books, or Game of Thrones, if you ever watched the show, it does require your attention much of the time, or at least your investment going back through the lore, because names will be thrown out, and if you don't at least use the actor time lore or something, sometimes you may feel a little overwhelmed and not know who they're talking about. This video is getting a little long. How could I not make it so long? I mean, there's just so much to say, but I'll sum this up real quick and tell you this is a must-own if you have a PlayStation. If you don't and you're a fan of these types of games, I would still say it's a must-play. If you have a friend with a PlayStation, I'd at least try to borrow one or see if you can play the demo at their place. And if you enjoy it, it's almost worth buying a PlayStation for if there weren't already so many other great games on PS5. But I'm going to go ahead and give this game a 10 out of 10. It was kind of hard to do this with this game. It's hard to explain, but I felt like the game deserved a 10 just for the pure polish. It's so well done. I don't know if we've seen a game not only as good as this, but has come out as polished as this in a while. So props to, what is it, Business Team 3 or something in Square. So this game's excellent. I did have a few minor gripes, which just real quick, where some of the side story, side content and little quests, I thought some were a little simple, but some are pretty good. So that's a really minor gripe. And then the other one was I would have preferred a little more customization and exploration. I think sometimes when you're out in the world, a lot of the items you'll see that you're tempted to go pick up, or you'll go get them all for a while, and then you kind of realize later on most are just some kind of crafting thing. And the issue I ran into is there really wasn't much to craft. So like I had like 500 of the crafting material. It's like what? Why would I, waste time exploring? Because there just wasn't much to craft. So if you were able to change your armor, customize Clive a little more, I would say it would put this up there. I mean, it's already one of the best games I've played in the last few years, and it's hard not to put it in. Time will tell, but it feels like maybe a top 20 all time for me at this point. But it's a really good game. I could go on and on and on, so I'll just finish up and say it's a 10 for me. Um, I want to give it like a 9.8 just for like 9.5, something like that for my scale, because normally I enjoy a little more in depth and like real deep dive into games. Like I love in Diablo when you can really geek out on the stats and things, and you can do a little bit of that in Elden Ring. But some people, that's more of a preference thing. So, anyways, get out there, try the game, play the demo. I don't see any way you couldn't love it. So yeah, thanks for watching, and check out my channel for I'm doing a playthrough and uploading it every day now, so you can check out the game if you're kind of on the fence about it, but I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thanks for watching Sweaty Zeus Gaming on YouTube and Rumble. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
I knew it would be big. But this...
That's what she said, right, Jill?
Come, Ifrit. Show me who you truly are.